If you play games with upscaling enabled and you want to upgrade to an upper mid-range graphics card in 2025, should you purchase the GeForce RTX 5070 Ti or the Radeon RX 9070 XT? That's what I'll be diving into today, comparing the GeForce card using DLSS 4 to the Radeon card using FSR 4, along with data from our previous videos looking into the RTX 5070 and RX 9070. We'll have a great picture of how the mid-range market is stacking up. Right now, there's a price gap between the 5070 Ti and 9070 XT, though that gap is not quite as large as it should be. The 5070 Ti is available at its $750 US MSRP, with several base models in stock at places like Newegg. The 9070 XT, though, is still bottoming out around $650 US, which is $50 above its MSRP. Does this affect the comparison in any significant way? Let's find out after this quick message.
Today's sponsor spot is brought to you by WOLFBOX and their MegaFlow handheld turbofans. The MegaFlow 100 features a 150,000 RPM brushless motor that enables a wind speed of 45 meters per second and offers up to 100 minutes of runtime. This makes it ideal for heavy-duty tasks like cleaning your PC, while still being capable of easier jobs with variable speed control. There's also the MegaFlow 50, a more budget-friendly option that still packs impressive power with a 110,000 RPM motor, 3 speed settings, and up to 240 minutes of runtime. Both models come with a handful of attachments and are charged via USB Type-C for maximum convenience. So for more information, please check the link in the video description.
As with previous videos in this series, the idea here is to provide a different dataset to our day one reviews, which largely focus on native performance at a range of resolutions. Native data is also included today, but the focus is the main upscaling modes at 1440p, quality, balanced, and performance. We want to see what sort of frame rates you can expect in a realistic gaming configuration. Does DLSS 4 or FSR 4 scale better? And what sort of modes are required to match the output performance between each model? As is the case with any upscaling benchmarks, it's important to brush up on the visual differences between DLSS 4 and FSR 4 because they do not output an identical image, and so any performance testing done in this way is not apples to apples. We have a lot of in-depth content right here on the channel that goes into how these upscalers compare, and they are important companions for this sort of performance testing. For testing today, I'm using the MSI Ventus 3X OC version of the RTX 5070 Ti and the Sapphire Pulse version of the RX 9070 XT, in addition to the MSI Vanguard SoC RTX 5070 and ASRock Steel Legend OC RX 9070. As these are different models, some of which have factory overclocks, all GPUs have been set to base spec clocks for testing, which is the standard way we benchmark. CPU being used here is the Ryzen 7 9800X3D, 32GB of DDR5 6000 CL30 memory, and the very latest game updates, Windows updates, and drivers have been used as of earlier this week when the testing was conducted. So 581.57 for NVIDIA, 25.10.1 for AMD. In both the GeForce and Radeon driver utilities, I've enabled the global override feature that upgrades games to the latest versions of DLSS 4 and FSR 4 respectively. Let's get into it. Horizon Zero Dawn Remastered runs slightly better on the Radeon model, with the 9070 XT coming in 4% faster using native rendering, with this lead extending to 6% using quality upscaling. Both of these GPUs offer a nice high refresh rate experience in this title when upscaling is enabled, and there isn't much to be gained using settings below the quality mode. The 5070 Ti offers performance most similar to the RX 9070 in this title. In Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, I'm testing using the very high preset with ray tracing enabled, and this is relatively easy for these GPUs to render. The RTX 5070 Ti is the faster card in this game, as it's 16% faster than the 9070 XT using native rendering and 15% faster using quality upscaling. This means that to get the same performance out of these models, the GeForce card can use DLSS quality mode, whereas the Radeon card has to use FSR performance, which delivers noticeably worse visual quality. The 5070 Ti and 9070 XT are neck and neck using native rendering in The Last of Us Part 1, but the GeForce model manages to edge ahead by a slim 3% margin when quality upscaling is enabled. At most, I saw a 5% advantage to the GeForce card using the performance mode, but for the most part, these models offer a similar experience, around 10% ahead of the RX 9070. Spider-Man 2 is faster on the RTX 5070 Ti, especially when upscaling is enabled. The GeForce model goes from 11% faster than the 9070 XT using native rendering to 19% faster when quality upscaling is used, and there was a significant 30% lead in 1% lows. This is of course with ray tracing enabled, but it seems that DLSS 4 scales a lot better than FSR 4 in this title, and overall the game is nicer to play in this configuration on the RTX 5070 Ti. Assassin's Creed Shadows is a clear win for the RX 9070 XT, offering 15% more performance using native rendering, and although this narrows to 10% using quality upscaling, it's still clearly faster. I only saw this gap shrink using performance mode upscaling, which is probably not a configuration most people would use at 1440p, and in general this is a title where upscaling is less effective than on average in terms of the performance boost it provides compared to native. While performance was neck and neck between the 5070 Ti and 9070 XT in The Last of Us Part 1, in the sequel, I found the Radeon model to be ahead by 13% using native rendering and 9% using quality upscaling. The RX 9070 was also the faster GPU here, offering 5% more performance than the 5070 Ti using upscaling. Ghost of Tsushima is also faster on the 9070 XT, coming in 8% ahead of the 5070 Ti using quality upscaling, which is similar to the results using native rendering. This is another title where the 5070 Ti is a closer match to the RX 9070, as it's just 3% faster than that model. Stalker 2 is one of the more difficult games to run across the selection being tested today, and it's an interesting case of FSR 4 scaling a little better on Radeon hardware than DLSS 4 on GeForce. This is because using native rendering, the 5070 Ti is 12% faster than the 9070 XT, but the margin drops to just a 3% advantage when quality upscaling is enabled. 1% lows in our test area also don't push much above 60 FPS regardless of what upscaling setting is used, which is a problem related to Unreal Engine 5 traversal stutter. Marvel Rivals is a close battle, with the 5070 Ti slightly ahead of the 9070 XT. There's a 4% margin using native rendering and a 5% margin using quality upscaling. At lower upscaling settings like performance, the two cards are basically offering the same experience. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is a win for the RTX 5070 Ti, offering 10% more performance than the 9070 XT using native rendering and 12% more performance using quality upscaling. However, this is largely seen when viewing average performance only. 1% lows are much closer between these models, so the Radeon card is more consistent when upscaling is enabled. Natively, the 5070 Ti also has a lead in 1% low performance. Star Wars Outlaws is a title where we previously saw FSR 4 scaling much better than DLSS 4, and this is also true when adding in the 5070 Ti results. The 5070 Ti goes from 8% faster than the 9070 XT using native rendering to 8% slower using quality upscaling. This is because the 9070 XT runs the title 39% faster with quality upscaling versus native, but the 5070 Ti only runs 18% faster. When upscaling is used, the 5070 Ti performs more like an RX 9070, which you wouldn't have known if we just looked at native results. Hunt Showdown is basically a tie between the 9070 XT and 5070 Ti, with the Radeon model ahead by 3% whether we use upscaling or not. At launch, the GeForce model was significantly faster in this title, but driver optimizations have brought the 9070 XT back to where it should be in a game that is still relatively popular despite launching over 5 years ago. In God of War Ragnarok, the 5070 Ti and 9070 XT start out neck and neck at native rendering, but the 9070 XT is able to take a 5% lead when quality upscaling is used. The 5070 Ti is still faster than a 9070 at a given quality mode and up to 13% faster using native rendering, but typically it sits between these two Radeon models. Stellar Blade is a bad game for Radeon, with the 5070 Ti delivering its best result yet relative to the 9070 XT. Using native rendering, it's 29% faster, and a similar 27% margin is seen using quality upscaling. The GeForce card also has much higher 1% low performance in the area we test, a 30% difference using quality upscaling, so AMD has some work to do to improve performance in this title. F125 is another example of the fastest card changing depending on the metric that we look at. Natively, the 5070 Ti is 6% faster than the 9070 XT, but this switches to the 9070 XT being 2% faster when viewing average frame rates using quality upscaling. Additionally though, the 5070 Ti is 9% faster in terms of 1% lows, so the GeForce model is more consistent, and this is what ultimately makes it the better choice for this game. Cyberpunk 2077 using the Ultra Ray Tracing preset is the heaviest example of ray tracing out of the games we're testing today. The 5070 Ti is unsurprisingly 18% faster using this configuration when rendering natively, and 13% faster on average using quality upscaling. But like we saw in F125, there is a larger difference in 1% lows, with the 5070 Ti having a 24% lead there using quality upscaling, so not only is the 5070 Ti faster, it's also the more consistent GPU. Once you get down to models like the RX 9070, frame pacing is noticeably worse as the card is only hovering around the 60 FPS mark, so any dips below that, especially the sorts of dips we're seeing here, does have more impact. There's no major difference between these models when viewing Hogwarts Legacy performance using the Ultra preset. Natively, the GeForce card is slightly faster, and then using upscaling, the two are identical. So it's pretty safe to call this a tie, whether we look at average or 1% low numbers. Borderlands 4 is another title that offers similar performance on both the 5070 Ti and 9070 XT using the Badass preset. At most, the 9070 XT was 2% faster using quality upscaling, but this margin is close enough we call it a tie. Mafia the Old Country runs better on the RX 9070 XT, coming in 9% faster than the 5070 Ti using native rendering and 13% faster using quality upscaling. The 5070 Ti performs more like an RX 9070 in this title, with the 9070 still slightly ahead, so this is quite a good result for Radeon. On the flip side, Dying Light the Beast runs best on GeForce GPUs. Natively, the 5070 Ti is 19% faster than the 9070 XT, which is one of the larger margins we've seen in favor of GeForce, and while this gap shrinks to 14% using quality upscaling, it's still the clearly faster GPU. The 9070 XT needs to use at least balanced upscaling to get in the ballpark of the 5070 Ti using quality upscaling. We saw similar performance between the 5070 Ti and 9070 XT in the Ultras. The GeForce model was 3% faster natively and the Radeon model 4% faster using quality upscaling. This is an example where the 9070 XT tended to have better 1% low performance at a similar average frame rate, and FSR 4 tended to scale a little better than DLSS 4. The last title I'm looking at is Battlefield 6 in a custom bot match. Using native rendering at 1440p with the Overkill preset, the 5070 Ti was 5% faster than the 9070 XT. This lead extended to 9% when using quality upscaling and 11% using balanced upscaling, so DLSS is scaling a little better than FSR here. 1% low performance is closer between these models, but typically the GeForce card offers the faster experience. Now it's time to look at the 22 game average calculated using a geomean. We'll start off by looking at native rendering, where the RTX 5070 Ti is 5% faster than the RX 9070 XT. That's basically the same margin as we saw in our 55 game benchmark earlier this year, but a little different to our more recent 9070 XT retest, where we noted the 9070 XT is now faster than it was at launch. In that video, we found the 9070 XT was around 3% ahead of the 5070 Ti across a 16 game average, but this was largely using rasterized titles, whereas this game sample today is a mixture of raster and ray tracing. However, when using quality upscaling, the margin between these models is reduced to the point where the 5070 Ti is just 2% faster, making it effectively a tie. I saw similar margins using lower upscaling modes, 3% faster with balanced and 2% faster with performance, along with very similar 1% low performance. So across a decent sample of games at 1440p, both raster and ray tracing, using typical upscaling settings, the RTX 5070 Ti and RX 9070 XT are very similar. This data also shows that the 5070 Ti is 15% faster than the RX 9070 using native rendering, and 9% faster using quality upscaling. This means that a typical performance match is the RX 9070 using balanced upscaling and the RTX 5070 Ti using quality upscaling. The 5070 Ti is definitely faster, and this enables a better visual output, but they're not that far apart at 1440p. On the other hand, the 5070 Ti is 27% faster than the 5070 using native rendering and 24% faster using quality upscaling. So there's no DLSS 4 configuration the 5070 can use that matches the performance of the 5070 Ti using DLSS 4. In fact, what the 5070 can do with quality upscaling is very similar to what the 5070 Ti can do natively. When we look at the spread of results between the 5070 Ti and 9070 XT using native rendering, we do see more examples where the 5070 Ti is more than 5% faster. This was the case in 9 games, whereas the 9070 XT was more than 5% faster in 4 games. Typically, the 5070 Ti performs better in ray-traced examples like Cyberpunk 2077, Ratchet and Clank, and Spider-Man 2, but this isn't always the case, as games like Stellar Blade and Dying Light the Beast do not use ray tracing. When we switch to looking at quality upscaling, things even out. There are 7 games where the 5070 Ti was more than 5% faster, 10 games that were effectively tied, and 5 games where the 5070 Ti was more than 5% slower. So these two cards are both evenly matched on average and when looking at the spread of results. So at the end of the day, would we recommend gamers purchase the RTX 5070 Ti or the RX 9070 XT? Well, if both GPUs were available at the MSRP, $750 for the 5070 Ti, $600 for the 9070 XT, I think the Radeon model is the obvious choice. Performance is basically the same as the 5070 Ti when upscaling is used, and the 9070 XT is 20% cheaper. If both cards are available at the MSRP in your region, with the Radeon model sitting 20% cheaper, the 9070 XT is the one to get. Of course, there are nuances to this discussion because even with very similar performance on average, the 5070 Ti is still the better overall product. It has a stronger feature set, DLSS 4 is supported in more titles and typically has the best image quality, and older titles have a decent fallback upscaler in DLSS 3 or 2. While the 9070 XT gaming experience is similar to the 5070 Ti in titles that support FSR 4, it's a very different experience in titles that don't, where the GeForce card has a large image quality advantage. The 9070 XT doesn't have a raw performance advantage that's able to overcome this, for example using native rendering, while the 5070 Ti would use quality upscaling. Whether or not this difference in upscaler support matters to you depends heavily on the sorts of games you play. If you largely stick to the latest releases, FSR 4 support has been very good across this year. AMD has been on top of getting this feature in brand new titles like Battlefield 6 Day 1, and I'm reasonably confident that will continue in the future. So for those sorts of gamers, what we've been talking about throughout this video will apply most of the time. But if you play a mixture of games, including favorites from past years, broader DLSS support may be more appealing. With all of that said, I think the price and cost per frame difference between the 9070 XT and 5070 Ti at MSRP mitigates this feature gap and makes the Radeon model the more attractive option. Even in heavier ray tracing examples like Cyberpunk 2077 with ultra ray tracing, yes, the 5070 Ti is 13% faster on average with 24% better 1% lows, but it's also 25% more expensive. At this point, the ray tracing performance gap is only going to matter the most if you are interested in extreme examples like path tracing, where previously we've shown the 5070 Ti to be somewhat usable and much faster than the 9070 XT. Is a better experience in a handful of path trace games worth spending 25% more when performance is similar outside of those games? Even as someone that mostly plays single player titles, I'd say no. Right now though, the 9070 XT is $650 US, while the 5070 Ti is $750, reducing the margin to just $100, which makes the 9070 XT 13% cheaper instead of the 20% cheaper that it should be. That certainly makes the 9070 XT less attractive, but given the models offer similar performance using upscaling at 1440p, I don't think opting for the 9070 XT is an outrageous decision. It's okay value, but not the good value it would be if it was $600. The real winner here appears to be the RX 9070, even in a comparison to the 5070 Ti, as it's available at its $550 MSRP. This makes the 5070 Ti 36% more expensive for just 9% more performance when upscaling is used at 1440p. On a cost per frame basis, this makes the 9070 20% cheaper per frame, which is a very decent position, and this is the same difference we should see between the 9070 XT and 5070 Ti at their respective MSRPs. There are some occasional examples where the 5070 Ti is much faster than the 9070, but most of the time the 9070 is within the same ballpark and you can achieve similar results through small setting tweaks. That seems reasonable given the $200 price difference, and crucially, both cards have the same amount of VRAM. In Australia, things are even more favourable to Radeon. Right now, the RTX 5070 Ti is available as low as $1,400, and the RX 9070 XT is at $1,100. So this is the 20% cost saving we should be seeing in the US at MSRP. But the RX 9070 is just $900, making the 5070 Ti 55% more expensive for just 9% more performance. So the 9070 XT is good compared to the 5070 Ti, but the RX 9070 is even better. There's not much more to say here, so that's it for this video really. If you appreciate these sorts of comparisons and performance reviews even months after these cards have launched, then consider subscribing to the channel and supporting us on Patreon. Links to that is in the description below. If you sign up, you get access to some pretty cool benefits like our Discord community, monthly live streams, BTS content, and plenty of other good stuff. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.